the pain like.
Hey guys, dearyoongi here, and welcome back to my channel. As I'm sure some of you are sick of hearing about by now, I have been into K-pop for quite some time, and I have seen a lot of groups come and go. So from that, I do feel it has gotten to a point where you can kind of just tell sometimes when a group appears to be destined for brighter things, or to stay in nugudom forever if they don't just disband early. So in today's video, we are going to be discussing the surefire ways you can spot if a K-pop group is likely to succeed or not. This is going to be the list of 6 things, because that's my favorite number, which I have spotted over my time as a K-pop fan that usually rings alarm bells for me, both as a marketer and as a K-pop fan. And I'll try to include examples wherever possible. Maybe you'll find this useful too. So without further ado, let's get started. And in no particular order, one sign for me that a K-pop group is not likely to last is the company's reputation or track record. When I'm looking into a group to stan, I do often find myself saying, wait, what label are they under? And I know this isn't fair on the artists themselves, because their company should be no reflection on them or how we view them. But unfortunately, an artist's label can literally make or break them. There has been a debate within the K-pop fan space for as long as I can remember regarding the Big Three, which eventually became the Big Four once Hype Corporation began to form in the way it did, acquiring numerous companies. But the idea of this Big Three or Four does exist for a reason, because a group under a larger or more established label is more likely to succeed because they're more likely to get the backing required to push and promote them. Unfortunately, a lot of companies within the K-pop industry that seem to pop up hoping they can plug very little money into an artist and that they'll just blow up and become really successful and make millions of dollars. These types of companies debut group after group with so much potential, which sadly goes unexplored in the end. I want to include examples for every point I make, but for this one, just as I'm speaking, I'm sure we can all think of many examples of K-pop labels right off the top of our heads who seem to create incredible groups, but they either fail to promote them properly or treat them poorly. These companies have a poor reputation, and they are unlikely to suddenly change overnight, even if they claim they're going to. Let's think. TS Entertainment, Fantagio, Pledis, Jellyfish, the list goes on. These are all labels who have been accused of mistreating their artists with poor working conditions and completely unrealistic expectations, lack of promotions, lack of comebacks, etc. If any one of these labels were to announce that they're debuting a new group, I would of course be excited and still perhaps interested, but it would also instantly make me worry for them, just because it's not exactly like these labels have the best reputation to begin with. Why would this time be any different? Okay, the next sign I wanted to discuss that would point towards a group being unlikely to succeed is little to no distinct branding. In a market as saturated as the K-pop industry, the most important thing a K-pop group can do is separate itself from every other group around them. And ideally, as a company, you're going to want to establish this quickly. When looking at debuting a new group, they cannot just throw together 5 or 6 people and say, okay, let's call them the Pretty Girls, or how about Girls? That'll work, okay, done. Yes, I am speaking from trauma and experience here. I really did used to stan a girl group called Girls. Whenever I see a K-pop group debut with a really generic name that would be impossible to search in Google, I do just the biggest sigh ever, because it's only going to harm the group and its brand rankings in the long run. Usually what happens is labels seem to pluck any old name out of the sky and then end up having to change it down the line because they realize they were simply never going to appear in search because their name is something like the word two or the word kingdom, which are common words that will appear elsewhere outside of the industry. But aside from just poor name choices having a detrimental effect on a group's likelihood to succeed, lack of any branding altogether can have just the same effect. Something as little as having a bad or non-existent logo, no interesting story or concept to the members' profiles, or nothing unique to them in any way, are all things that make me think, okay, this is likely going to be just another group that gets lost in the wash. And this is because they are not going to be able to establish any factors that are uniquely recognizable to the audience as them opposed to anybody else. Next up, and this isn't a million miles away from when we discussed the companies in the first point, but another factor that tells you a group is likely destined for failure is a lack of promotions, particularly in various forms of media. I understand that for companies they might not know how to navigate the social media day and age in the best way for their artists, but I insist that they learn rapid, because every business has to. In the K-pop industry, to be seen is literally everything. And nowadays, with the rise of social media impacting our everyday lives so strongly in the way it has, there have been many examples of K-pop idols finding success across social media platforms that they weren't finding in the industry, in places such as TikTok or Instagram. A nice example is Ghost 9 member Prince, whose fun personality and relatability in his videos has seen him gaining a lot of recognition. Those who aren't active on social media in this industry will likely get left behind, because this is the best way nowadays for K-pop labels to reach a larger overseas audience with their artists. K-pop fans are very heavily content-centric. We love content, whether this be behind-the-scenes content on YouTube, regular photos of our favorite group members on Instagram, or dance challenges on TikTok. Literally anything is better than radio silence. What's even worse, and this is just a personal pet peeve of mine, is when a K-pop company goes to all the effort of creating a social media profile for one of their artists on literally every single platform, but then they never post on them or only update once every few months, because there's just so many potential problems with this. One, the algorithm may not favor anything you post when you eventually do because you're never there. So that social media platform isn't going to think, oh, I need to plug this person's photo because it's the first one they've published all year. No, they're going to push the group who are posting reels that get thousands of views and keep people on the app every day. And two, any followers you do gain simply will just disappear over time if they lose interest. I don't mean disappear from your following numbers, they'll still be there, but they might not be seeing or interacting with anything you post. Like, just for context, in my day job, we post on social media 3 to 4 times a week due to the nature of the industry we are in. Within the K-pop world, you could probably even increase this to 5+ times a week because the audience is so active on social media. But aside from just the social media aspect, alarm bells also start to ring for me if a K-pop company is ignoring physical media, such as appearances on music shows or variety shows, because these can also have a big impact on a group's visibility. Now, don't get me wrong, I totally understand the potential drawbacks for a company when it comes to considering appearing on music shows. There is a cost to this for very little reward or payment in their eyes, maybe. Variety show appearances can be time-consuming or harder to book for more unknown groups, perhaps, but these various avenues do still count and should be explored. One unique factor about the K-pop industry that a lot of us love is the availability of all its additional types of content. So when companies choose not to utilize them to their advantage, I just want to shake them and say, what are you doing? Lack of promotion is usually always down to lack of funding. But this links us right back to their labels, and it is their responsibility to ensure that they are doing whatever they can to see a return on their investment. Okay, another sign that a group is going to struggle to succeed is inconsistent comebacks. I'm sure if you were thinking of some of your own signs a group is not going to last at home, you're probably going to come up with this one too, because this is an issue we have seen in the industry for years. A K-pop group will appear to be doing well, gaining a larger audience with every comeback, and establishing themselves in the industry as one to watch, which is very difficult when the market is so full. And then for some reason, their label will decide that this is a good time for a hiatus, or at the very least, even if they don't tell us it's a hiatus, they just simply will stop coming back, then randomly come back a few years later and wonder where all the fans have gone. I feel like so many of us have lost groups we love to this. When the group does eventually come back, they are simply going to struggle to retain that original audience. Sure, there will always be the ridiculously loyal fans who wait patiently for them no matter how long and are happy just to see them return, but for the most part, casual listeners will have moved on to the hundreds of other groups who debuted or surpassed them in the meantime. And unfortunately, while we'd like to think that labels care more about nurturing their existing fandom, it is those casual listeners that really make a difference to streaming numbers and growth opportunities. I could go off on a crazy tangent here with so many examples, so let's just look at a couple. Everglow. Everglow is a 6-member girl group who very recently just left their label Yuehua Entertainment, and thank God for that. From their debut and for the first few years of their career, Everglow were climbing the charts, growing their fandom, and they appeared to be a big statement group for the 4th generation of K-pop. However, they suffered a 2-year gap between their track Pirates, released in 2021, and their next comeback, Slay, in 2023. While fans were of course happy to see them back at last when they did return, the momentum for them had died down significantly. And another example, Weki Meki. If there's ever an opportunity to talk about my girls, you know I'm going to take it. Sorry guys. Weki Meki were, past tense, still hurts, an 8-member girl group under Fantagio Entertainment. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not going to lie and say they were like the most successful girl group around, especially in the later years of their career. But they did start off very strong, and the hype around them was big because the group featured 2 members of IOI. In their first few years, comebacks were steady and frequent. However, after 2021, they did not formally come back until 2024, which would ultimately be their last song before disbandment. Again, this issue will likely be another one that boils back to money and availability of funds, because the preparations that go into a group releasing new music are of course not cheap. But unfortunately, with the nature of the market being the way it is, K-pop companies must find a way to try and come back more frequently, because again, it relates back to the idea of anything is better than silence. And this could also be why we end up seeing some comebacks with lack of promotions, because the well has run dry by the time the company has funded the actual production itself. Speaking of comebacks, another sign that doesn't normally look good for a group is confusing or constantly changing concepts. One factor that makes the K-pop industry stand out compared to perhaps others is the fact that there is such a variety of concepts. There really is something out there for everybody, no matter what your taste is. With that being said, it is of course important for a group to establish the types of concept that fans can associate with them or their style. And even if they're a group who is more willing to explore various concepts, for example like 4th gen groups TXT or ATs, there's something about every concept they explore that seems to still distinctly be recognizably them. The issue starts to occur when every single time a group comes back, the song and style appears to be entirely different and they are practically unrecognizable. You'll see an entirely different style from the members and the music, and it's almost as though they're trying to create something totally different every time to see what sticks best. There's a multitude of issues with this. The first issue is that the group is going to struggle to establish any sort of clear identity if every single comeback is drastically different, and that is such a shame. When it's clear that a group has a sense of direction, it makes fans a lot more likely to tune in, because they know who the target audience is and they know if they're going to be included within that, and if it's something they want to continue to support. But when labels constantly try to change up a group's concept, this just shows fans that they have no sense of direction, because they're literally trying something new every time. It shows us that they haven't exactly been forward planning, because there doesn't appear to be any theme or story they want us to follow in the long term. For fans, this not only creates a sense of confusion every single time they come back, but also as a listener, how are you supposed to know if each comeback is going to be something for you? You'll never feel comfortable and content that this group is able to offer something you like. Thus, the group will struggle to build a fan base. And unfortunately, a K-pop group without a solid fan base is never going to be able to build a stable career. I will quickly give one example that springs to mind for me as a 3rd gen stan, and that is of course CLC. Throughout their career, CLC experimented with all sorts of concepts and different images, and some were definitely more successful than others. I think their most notable success was their 2017 release Hobgoblin, which had a very upbeat and girl crush sort of image. This song alone gained the group a lot of new listeners who were excited to see what they would do next. This is where, as a label, it is your job to continue the momentum. However, the next song the girls released in the same year, titled Where Are You, was an entire 180 style-wise. It was much slower and more like 80s style synth beat, and while I loved it as a regular fan and listener of the girls, I can totally see why and how a new listener would be thrown off by that. And as the years carried on, this issue unfortunately seemed to persist with the girls, and their label Cube Entertainment seemed unable to establish a clear image that was uniquely CLC, and this ultimately hurt them in the long run. And last but not least, one more sign that a group is unlikely to last is signs of conflict, either within the group itself or within the label. I think this one is of course quite self-explanatory. I won't go into too much detail. She says, I always say that, it's not true. I feel like the K-pop industry is very careful in trying to ensure that we do not see many signs of conflicts between group members. If these do occur, they try to keep them behind closed doors to not ruin the illusion for fans that all group members get along. However, regardless of whether or not we see the cracks in the armor, tensions amongst a group are never good, and if these boil over because people clash too much to even maintain a working relationship, it is bound to end badly. I think it's important for us to remember as fans that K-pop artists cannot be expected to befriend all of their group members. It is common that a lot of the time they'll try to at least maintain a working relationship with one another as colleagues. But if a group cannot even do that, think of any group who had previously had a bullying scandal such as AOA or Tiara, I'm showing my age now, aren't I? Then they will ultimately affect the rest of the group and its ability to move forward as a whole. And as for groups who are in conflict with their label, this probably also happens a lot more than we see as fans, because companies are going to hope that we, the K-pop audience, are not delving any deeper into what is going on behind the scenes and exploring if their artists are unhappy. They want us to just keep consuming the content, spending the money, and move on. But if artists have made it clear that they are not content with their situation, they're going to struggle moving forward if they cannot meet eye to eye with the company and the conditions within their contract. An example of an artist who seemed to work things out with their label at the time is 9i, where all but one member initiated a lawsuit with their label First One Entertainment last year. This all appeared to blow over within literally 3 months, and the label vowed that they were liaising with the boy group members to discuss how they could move forward cohesively. While we're still waiting to see how that pans out, considering they just lost a member to Boys Planet 2 who has now left the group altogether, I won't hold my breath. And honestly, I would not be surprised if issues within the label last year still end up hurting them in the long run. Another example we could of course discuss to do with disputes between artist and label is NewJeans, who are currently in the middle of a dispute with their label after they attempted to terminate their contracts with label Adore due to claims of the label violating their trust and breaching their contract. Now, we cannot exactly comment at the moment on how this dispute has affected them in the long run and if the group are going to suffer, as they currently do seem to be playing ball and working alongside Adore for appearances that are scheduled. However, there will definitely at least be a strain in their relationship which is going to make a working partnership difficult, if not at least awkward. And if that's not the issue, at the very least the group could suffer a loss of fans and tarnishing of image due to this dispute. Okay guys, and that was it for today's video. But before we end today's video, I do feel the need to just clarify that a group could of course have each and every one of these things perfectly ticked in a box and still not succeed, or vice versa. Unfortunately, the industry is oversaturated, and that therefore does mean that each and every artist might not always get the fair shot they deserve. The point is that some of these practices are likely signs of groups which are more likely to suffer than others. I hope that makes sense. And thank you so much for watching if you got this far. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, and I would love to hear your thoughts down in the comments, and if you can think of any more examples of groups who have suffered because of any of these reasons. If you're new here, please hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell to be the first to hear whenever I upload, and I will see you next time. Bye guys!